قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة أنا ومن اتبعني وسبحان الله وما أنا من المشركين.
So return back to a lecture and we will continue with the final biography that Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi has finished these 18 biographies in this introduction of this great book Taqdimatul-Marifah bi Kitab al-Jarh wat-Tadeel with, and it is a biography of his honorable great father Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi. Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, and he's the second of the two scholars that Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi has mentioned in his fourth and final level, in which he has divided these imams, 18 imams, in this book into, along with his cousin Abu Zur'a ar-Razi, whose biography we finished, and now we will move to the biography of the final imam, Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, both from the city of Rai, which is present-day Tehran, the capital of Iran. And we'll begin, as always, with the name and lineage and kunya and matters pertaining to it of this great Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi. So he is Abu Hatim Muhammad ibn Idris ibn al-Munzir ibn Dawood al-Hanzali al-Tamimi al-Razi. His kunya is Abu Hatim, his name is Muhammad ibn Idris ibn al-Munzir ibn Dawood al-Hanzali al-Tamimi al-Razi. These are his descriptions, al-Hanzali al-Tamimi al-Razi. And Imam al-Zahabi has described him with his great titles in his book Siyar Alam al-Nubula, al-Imam al-Hafidh al-Naqid Shaykh al-Muhaddithin, that he is from the Imams of the Muslims, from the utmost precise memorizer and the narrator of Hadith, from the scholars of this science, and the one who was well versed in the detailed matters of this science, who critiqued narrations and the narrators of Hadith, Shaykh al-Muhaddithin. He is the Imam of the scholars of Hadith, the Imam of the Muhaddithin, and he is from the middle level of the students of the Tabi'ul Atba. He is from the middle level of the students who took from the Tabi'ul Atba. As far as his ascription, Al-Hanzali al-Tamimi, then it is not to the tribe of Hanzala ibn Tamim. So they are not from this Arabic tribe originally, rather they are his forefathers, they are from the freed slaves of this tribe. They are from the freed slaves of this tribe of Hanzala ibn Tamim. Hanzala ibn Tamim, and this is why, this is one of the two reasons that he's ascribed to this tribe, Al-Hanzali al-Tamimi. Al-Hanzali al-Tamimi, from the freed slaves of the tribe of Hanzala ibn Tamim. The second reason is that he used to live in the city of Rai, in his city, in the road and area of Hanzala, the road and passageway of Hanzala, and this is why he is ascribed to them also. This is why he is also ascribed to them. Imam Ibn al-Qaysarani, Ibn Tahir al-Maqdisi, he says, Al-Hanzali al-awwal mansub ila al-qabila wa fihim kathra wa thani mansub ila darb Hanzala bir-Ray. منهم أبو حاتم محمد بن إدريس بن المنذر الحنظلي وابنه عبد الرحمن بن أبي حاتم وداره ومسجده في هذا الدرب رأيته ودخلته. That Imam Ibn Qaysarani, he says that the ascription of Al-Hanzali, it is of two types. One is ascription to the tribe of Hanzala ibn Tamim, which is from which are several scholars. Several of the narrators of Hadith who are ascribed Al-Hanzali are from this tribe originally, from the Arab tribe of Hanzala ibn Tamim. The second is ascription to the road and passageway of Hanzala in the city of Rai, which was a well-known famous road and passageway in the old city of Rai in Tehran, present-day Iran. He says from them is Abu Hatim al-Hanzali, Abu Hatim Muhammad Idris ibn Munzir al-Hanzali, and his son Abdurrahman ibn Abi Hatim, the author of this great book Taqdimatul-Marifah and al-Jarh wat-Tadeel. He says their house and their masjid was on this road and passageway of Darb Hanzala in Rai. He says, I have seen their house and their masjid, I have entered it. I have entered their masjid. So he's ascribed to Hanzali and Tamimi for one of these two reasons. Either because he was from the freed, his forefathers were from the freed slaves who were ascribed to this tribe, or because he lived in this road and passage of Hanzala in the city of Rai. As far as the description of al-Razi, then it has preceded with us in the previous biography of Imam Abu Zur'a al-Razi. There is ascription to the city of Rai from the major cities of Khurasan, from the major centers of hadith studies and knowledge in those times, and ascription to it is Razi with the addition of Zai, that is in opposition to the principles of the Arabic language, where ascription is done just by adding the ya. Makkah becomes Makki, and Kufa becomes Kufi as has preceded, Basra becomes Basri, Baghdad becomes Baghdadi, but Rai, then the Zai is added to become Razi, which is in opposition to the principles of the Arabic language. But this is how the people of those lands, they ascribe themselves. This is how it was heard from them. And originally, Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi and his family, then they are from the city of Asbahan. Another city in Iran, another city in present-day Iran. And specifically, they are from the town in the city of Gurwa'an. And since the Arabs, they don't have the letter Ga in the Arabic language that is present in the Farsi, Persian language, and also other languages such as the Urdu language, they say it with Jim, Jurwa'an. And it was a major town in Asbahan. Imam Abdullah ibn Muhammad ibn Yaqub, he says, سمعت أبا حاتم يقول نحن من أهل أسبهان من قرية قروان وأهلنا كانوا يقدمون علينا في حياة أبي ثم انقطعوا عنا. That Abdullah ibn Muhammad ibn Yaqub, he says that I heard Abu Hatim al-Razi saying that we are originally from Asbahan. Our family originally is from Asbahan, from the town of Gurwa'an, and our family members, they used to visit us from Asbahan to Rai. They used to come visit us in Rai during the lifetime of my father, and then this visitation stopped after his death. And as we mentioned in a previous lecture, then he is the cousin of Imam Abu Zur'a al-Razi, whose biography is preceded, and he is the maternal cousin of Imam Abu Zur'a al-Razi. We relate the statement of Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Razi. He says, كان أبو زرعة أباه خال أبي حاتم وكان أبو حاتم أسن من أبي زرعة على ما بلغني ب5 سنين وأبو زرعة مات قبل أبي حاتم ب2 سنين. That Abu Zur'a's father, then he was the uncle of Abu Hatim. He was the maternal uncle of Imam Abu Hatim, and Imam Abu Hatim was older than Imam Abu Zur'a by 5 years. He was older. He was born before Imam Abu Zur'a by 5 years, but Imam Abu Zur'a passed before Imam Abu Hatim by 2 years. By 2 years, as has preceded. As far as the birth of this great Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, then he was born in the year 195 after the Hijrah. He was born in the year 195 after the Hijrah. Then we move on to the next point of discussion, which is him seeking knowledge, his travels and pursuits in seeking knowledge and the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Imam Abu Hatim is from those rare scholars who is well known by his travels, by his extensive travels, and his stories in these travels, and his struggle and perseverance and patience in these travels for seeking knowledge and the knowledge of the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we'll just mention some of these stories and matters. One needs a long sitting for one to mention all of that which he has relayed from that which he encountered in these vast travels of his in the pursuit of hadith. But we'll just summarize with a few of these stories. So we begin this matter of discussion by saying that the first time and the year in which he started seeking the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and the knowledge of hadith and his sciences was in the year 209 after the Hijrah. 209 after the Hijrah, meaning he was only 14 years of age. He was only 14 years of age. His son, Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, he says, سمعت أبي يقول كتبت الحديث سنة 9 وأنا ابن 14 سنة وكتبت عن عتاب بن زياد المروزي سنة 10 لما قدم علينا حاجا وكنت أفيد الناس عن أبي عبد الرحمن المقرئ وأنا بالرأي فخرج الناس إليه فيسمعون منه ويرجعون وأنا بالرأي. He says that I heard my father saying that the first time that I learned and I heard a hadith and I wrote a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ was in the year 209 after the hijrah, when I was only 14 years of age. When I was only 14 years of age, and I wrote upon the well-known scholar of Rai, Attab ibn Ziyad al-Marwazi, a hadith. I heard a hadith from him and I sought knowledge of hadith from him in the year 210 after the hijrah, when he was 15 years of age, when he passed by us while going to Hajj. So he relayed, stayed in Rai, and he relayed a hadith in the city of Rai. So I sought the knowledge of hadith from him in this year. And he says that Imam Abu Hatim, showing the great position and status he reached in this science in an early age. In an early age, he says, I used to benefit the scholars of Rai with the ahadith of the great Imam Abu Abdurrahman al-Muqri'. Abu Abdurrahman al-Muqri', and he is Abdullah ibn Yazid al-Qurashi. Abu Abdurrahman, Abdullah ibn Yazid al-Qurashi, al-Makki. He is from the thiqat, the trustworthy, utmost precise narrators of hadith, from the minor atba'ut tabi'in. He was from the foremost of the scholars of Makkah in his time. Foremost of the narrators of hadith and the scholars of Makkah in his time, and the foremost of the Qurra, the reciters of the Quran. And it has been mentioned regarding him in his biography that he recited and taught the Quran for 70 years. That he recited and relayed the recitation of the Quran for 70 years. This is why he is well known by his nickname Al-Muqri', Abu Abdurrahman Al-Muqri'. So he says, Imam Abu Hatim, that I had collected his ahadith from the scholars of Rai before I even traveled to outside of Rai. When I was only 14, 15 years of age, in this tender age, I had collected the ahadith of Abu Abdurrahman al-Muqri' from the scholars of Rai, and I used to benefit the scholars and students of hadith and my colleagues and contemporaries with these ahadith. And they traveled to Makkah. They traveled to Makkah to hear this ahadith directly from him. To hear this ahadith with ulu, directly from him in his lifetime, and they would return back, and I would still be in Rai. I would still be, because I was not at an age and at a position to travel outside of Rai in that time, but I would narrate a hadith to them of this great Imam. They would travel to him in Makkah, hear from him, and return. I would still be in Rai, showing the great position he reached and the vast knowledge and hadith that he collected from a young age. Before his travels. Then he started his vast journeys and travels after he completed collecting the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and the knowledge of the science from the scholars of his region of Rai. He traveled extensively, far to the east and the west, several times, and remained in these journeys, as will come, for years and years, and bore the highest and the utmost difficulties, the highest level of difficulties in this path. So he traveled in some of his journeys along with his son, the author of this great book, Taqdimatul-Marifah, Imam Ibn Abi Hatim. And he met from the earliest of the scholars of hadith that he could meet. So he met the companions of Sufyan ibn Uyayna and Waki ibn al-Jarrah. Imam Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Waki ibn al-Jarrah, from the major scholars of the Atba'u Tabi'in in their regions in Mecca and in Kufa, whose biographies have preceded. He met their companions and their foremost students in these journeys. And we'll mention some stories of these journeys. Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, he says, سمعت أبي يقول أول سنة خرجت في طلب الحديث أقمت 7 سنين أحسيت ما مشيت على قدمي زيادة على 1000 فرسخ قال ثم تركت العدد بعد ذلك. That he says, Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, that I heard my father saying, that the Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi saying, that the first time I traveled outside of Rai in the pursuit of the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I remained in this travel for 7 years. I remained in this travel and journey for a continuous period of 7 years. 7 years. He said, I started to count my steps. And the distance I had crossed at the beginning of my travel. So I reached 1,000 farsakh. 1,000 farsakh in counting. And farsakh, then it was a unit of measurement in those times. Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, he comments on the statement of his father, Abu Hatim, in this book, Taqdimatul-Marifah. He says, قُلْتُ مَسَافَ ذَلِكْ نَحُ أَرْبَعَةْ أَشْهُرْ سَيْرْ الْجَادَّةِ. That he says, alf farsakh, 1,000 farsakh, it is equivalent to a journey of 4 months. Equivalent to a journey of 4 months for a normal person. For a normal person. So, and today, in our times, in our measurements, then 1,000 farsakh is approximately 5,000 kilometers. 5,000 kilometers. So Imam Abu Hatim, he says, I started my first journey. I stayed in it for 7 years. I started to count my steps and the distance I traveled until 5,000 kilometers. Until 5,000 kilometers, then he says, then I left counting after that. I left and I lost count after that. After 5,000 kilometers. He says, خرجت من البحرين إلى مصر ماشيا ثم إلى الرملة ماشيا ثم إلى دمشق ثم أنطاكية وترسوس ثم رجعت إلى حمص ثم إلى الرقة ثم ركبت إلى العراق كل هذا في سفري الأول وأنا ابن 20 سنة. He says that I traveled from Bahrain, which is in the east of the Arabic Peninsula. He traveled from Bahrain, he says, to Misr, Egypt, to the west, on my foot. On my foot. He says, then I traveled from Egypt to Ramla, a well-known city in Palestine, on my foot. Then I traveled from there to Damascus, the capital of Syria, on my foot. Then I traveled northwest to Antakya and Tarsus, which are in present-day Turkey, the country of Turkey, which were the border areas of the Muslim nation and empire in those times, on my foot. Then he says, I returned back to Hims, a well-known city in Syria. Then I traveled to Raqqa, another city in Syria. Then I traveled to Iraq, to the east, to Iraq. He says, all of this in just my first journey for the seeking of the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I was still in my 20s. I was still 20 years of age. I was still 20 years of age. Then he says, kharajtu min ar-Rai, for mentioning when he started his journey. When he started his journey. He says, kharajtu min ar-Rai, فدخلت الكوفة في رمضان سنة 13 وجاءنا نعي المقري وأنا بالكوفة. He says, I started this journey of 7 years by traveling from Rai to Kufa, to the city of Kufa in Iraq. And I reached Kufa in the month of Ramadan in the year 213 after the Hijrah. In the year 213 after the Hijrah. And there reached us the news of the death of Imam al-Muqri, Imam Abu Abdurrahman Abdullah ibn Yazid al-Muqri, who was preceded, and he passed away in the year 213. He passed away in the same year, 213 after the Hijrah. He says, while I was in Kufa. While I was in Kufa, and 213 meaning he was only 18 years of age. He was only 18 years of age. So he started seeking the knowledge of hadith in Rai when he was 14. And he started his journeys, travels in seeking hadith and his knowledge when he was 18. When he was 14, he started seeking hadith in the city of Rai and started seeking knowledge, traveling for seeking the hadith of Prophet Muhammad when he was 18, and remained in his journey, this first journey, for 7 years, when he was in his 20s. When he was in his 20s. Then he says, ثُمَّ رَحَلْتُ ثَانِيًا سَنَةَ 42 ثُمَّ رَجَعْتُ إِلَى الرَّيْ سَنَةَ 45 وَحَجَجْتُ رَابِعَ حِجَّةٍ فِي سَنَةِ 55. That he says that these journeys continued. Even in his old age, he says, my second journey in the pursuit of the hadith of Prophet Muhammad was in the year 242. 242 after the Hijrah, when he was almost 50 years of age. When he was almost 50 years of age. And he says, I returned back to Rai, my city, after 3 years. This journey also took 3 long years, continuous 3 years. I returned in the year 245 after the Hijrah. Then he says, I again exited in the pursuit of the hadith and to perform the Hajj. To perform the Hajj to Mecca, travel to Mecca, and also seek the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this was the 4th Hajj that I performed. The 4th travel to Mecca and the scholars of Mecca and to perform the Hajj. He says this was in the year 255 after the Hijrah. 255 after the Hijrah, when he was 60. almost 60 years of age. And in this Hajj, in this fourth Hajj, then he took with him his great son, Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, the author of this book, Imam Abu Muhammad Abdurrahman Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, who had reached of age, to travel with him in Hajj. And they traveled to the major scholars of Hadith in all over the Muslim lands in this journey, hearing a Hadith from them and learning the science of Hadith from them. Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, he says also, سمعت أبي يقول سرت من الكوفة إلى بغداد ما لا أحصي كم مرة. He says that I heard my father Imam Abu Hatim saying that I traveled from Kufa, from the city of Kufa to Baghdad, both of them in Iraq, from Kufa to the capital of Iraq, Baghdad, so many times that I cannot count, that I cannot recall the number of times I traveled from Kufa to Baghdad for the pursuit of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and this science. And today, the distance between Kufa and Baghdad, then it is almost 175 kilometers. 175 kilometers he says, I traveled from Kufa, Baghdad so many times that I lost count. In those times where the traveling was done mostly on foot in the most difficult of environment and bearing these great difficulties. Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, he also says, سمعت أبي يقول بقيت في سنة 14 8 أشهر بالبصرة وكان في نفسي أن أقيم سنة فانقطعت نفقتي فجعلت أبيع ثيابي حتى نفذت وبقيت بلا نفقة ومضيت أطوف مع صديق لي إلى المشيخة. He says, mentioning a part of this travels and the difficulties that he bore in these travels, he says that in the year 214 after the Hijrah, in the early part of his first travel, he says that I remained 8 years in the city of Basra in Iraq, seeking the knowledge of hadith from the scholars of Basra. And I intended to stay a complete year in Basra. I intended initially to stay a complete year in the city of Basra in seeking hadith and sciences. He says, but within 8 months, my sustenance ended. That which I had to live off of, it ended. So I started selling clothing that I had, so that I could continue to seek the knowledge of hadith from the scholars of Basra. He says, until I sold off all my clothing, and even that ended. So he says, I remained without any sustenance. Without any sustenance. So he says, I used to go with a companion of mine to the shuyukh, to the scholars of hadith in Basra. وَأَسْمَعْ إِلَى الْمَسَاءِ ومضيت أطوف مع صديق لي إلى المشيخة وأسمع إلى المساء فانصرف رفيقي ورجعت إلى بيتي وجعلت أشرب الماء من الجوع ثم أصبحت فغدا علي رفيقي فجعلت أطوف معه في سماع الحديث على جوع شديد وانصرفت جاعيا فلما كان من الغد غدا علي فقال مر بنا إلى المشايخ قلت أنا ضعيف لا يمكنني قال ما ضعفك قلت لا أكتمك أمري قد مضى يومان ما طعمت فيهما شيئا. That he says that I had a companion where we would go to the scholars of hadith in the city of Basra, learning hadith, hearing a hadith from them. He says I would remain going from a sitting to another, gathering of knowledge and dictating hadith and hearing a hadith from one sitting to another until late at night. So when I returned back to where I was staying, my companion departed me. So from my severe hunger, he said, I could not find except some water to drink. Then I got up in the morning and my companion came back, and we again started going to the shuyukh and the scholars of hadith to learn hadith from them until the end of the night. And I was upon this state of severe hunger. And I returned back again to my house, and I could not find anything to eat nor to drink. And then the morning came, the second, third day, and my companion came back to me again early morning to again travel to the gatherings of knowledge, to the scholars to hear a hadith from them. So he said on this third day, after completing 2 days of this severe hunger without any food, without any drink, he says, now I'm extremely weak. I'm extremely weak. I'm not able. I'm not able. So his companion, he asked him to reason, the reason for his weakness. So he said, I will not hide. I will not hide this matter from you. 2 complete days have passed by. I have not eaten a single thing. I have not eaten a single thing. فقال قد بقي معي دينار فنصفه لك ونجعل النصف الآخر في الكراء فخرجنا من البصرة وأخذت منه النصف دينار. So upon hearing this, my companion, he says that from my sustenance only a dinar has been left. Only a dinar, a dollar or a unit of currency, only a dinar has been left. So he said, half of it is for you. Half of it is for you. Imam Abu Hatim, half of it is for you, and the half we will pay for the person to lead us out of Basra, to lead us out of Basra to another city and locality where we can seek the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he said we use the half dinar to exit Basra to another city, and I took with me half this dinar as my sustenance for my future travel. Only half a dinar as my sustenance for my future travel. So this is just some of the stories of this great Imam and his efforts and sacrifices in seeking knowledge and the knowledge of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and the difficulties he bore in preserving and memorizing the sunnah for us. And these are the scholars by way of which and their efforts Allah Ta'ala preserved the religion, preserved the sunnah for us until our times. And in it are great examples for us to motivate us in seeking knowledge and striving in it and sacrificing everything that we possess for his sake. For this knowledge does not come except for the one who gives everything of him to it. One does not attain this knowledge except for the one who dedicates himself to it. Then we move on to the next part of our discussion with the shuyukh and the teachers of this great Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi. So from his shuyukh and teachers are Ubaidullah ibn Musa and Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Ansari and Abu Nu'aym al-Fadl ibn Dukain and Affan ibn Muslim and Abu Mushir al-Ghassani, the great Imam Abu Mushir al-Ghassani, whose biography has preceded with us, from the foremost of the Imams of the Ahle-Hadith in the region of Sham in his times, and Sa'id bin Abi Maryam and Yahya ibn Bukair and Adam ibn Abi Iyas and Muhammad ibn Bashar Bundar, Muhammad ibn Bashar, well known by his nickname Bundar, and Amr ibn Ali al-Fallas, and a nation of people who cannot be enumerated. The shuyukh and teachers of Imam Abu Hatim in this vast, extensive travels, these travels of decades throughout his life, from the east to the west, thousands and thousands of kilometers. Then he met from the foremost of the scholars of hadith that they cannot be enumerated, to the point that Imam al-Zahabi in his book Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, after he mentioned a long list of some of his shuyukh and teachers, a long list of some of his shuyukh and teachers, he says after it, يَتَعَذَّرْ إِسْتِقْصَى سَائِرْ مَشَائِخِهِ, that it is impossible that one can enumerate the remaining shuyukh and teachers that he learned from and that he met and he heard hadith from. And Imam al-Khalili, he says that قال لي أبو حاتم اللبان قد جمعت من روى عنه أبو حاتم الرازي فبلغوا قريبا من 3,000. He says that I collected the names of the shuyukh and teachers from the utmost precise narrators of hadith, from the imams of the science, from the science of hadith, who Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi heard a hadith from, learned a hadith from, narrated a hadith from. Then he says they reached 3,000 in number. This vast, large number of shuyukh and teachers that Imam Abu Hatim heard and learned hadith and his sciences from in his extensive travels for thousands of kilometers, for tens of years, for decades, from the east to the west. Then we move on to the next point of discussion, which is his students, his foremost students, and those who took knowledge from him, and those who learned hadith and his sciences from him and narrate hadith upon him. So from them are various levels showing the great status and position that he reached. So from his shuyukh and teachers are those who narrated hadith from him. They could not do except by relaying a hadith on his authority. Those are hadith that they could not even attain reach knowledge of by way of their shuyukh and teachers. They had to rely on the authority of one of the students, this great Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, due to the vast collection of hadith that were in his possession and memory. So from his shuyukh who narrated upon him are Yunus bin Abdul Ala and Rabi ibn Sulaiman al-Muazzin, and other than them. Then the next level, which are his contemporaries and companions and colleagues. So from his peers and contemporaries who narrated a hadith from him is his cousin, the great Imam Abu Zur'a al-Razi, whose biography also has preceded. Then comes the level of his students. So from them, of course, the first of his students, the foremost of them is his son, the great Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, Abu Muhammad Abdul Rahman Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, who preserved the knowledge of his father and compiled the statements and the knowledge of his father in several books that he has authored. From them, the foremost of them is this book, al-Jarh wat-Tadeel, in which he asked his father about every narrator of hadith in this book, 18,000 plus narrators, and he preserved his ruling upon these narrators, preserved his ruling with Jarh wat-Tadeel, with praising and criticizing these narrators. Then he authored a separate book, Ilal al-Hadith, in which he asked his father and his uncle Abu Zur'a al-Razi regarding the hidden defects in the hadith, and that is also published in 7 volumes. And he has another book, al-Marasil, in which he asked his father Abu Hatim and his uncle Abu Zur'a regarding the narrators who relay a hadith on narrators who they did not hear from. And these books are the foremost books in these branches of the science, in al-Jarh wat-Tadeel, in al-Ilal, and in Marasil. The books of Imam Ibn Abi Hatim are the foremost of the books in this science, and he preserved in these books the rulings and the statements and the knowledge of his father Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, along with his uncle Abu Zur'a and other scholars. So he is the foremost of the students of this great Imam. From the students of Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi is Imam Abu Dawud al-Sijistani and Imam al-Nasai. Imam Abu Dawud al-Sijistani, Imam al-Nasai, who are the authors of the well-known book of Sunan Abu Dawud and Sunan al-Nasai. From his students is Abu Zur'a al-Dimishqi and Ibrahim al-Harbi and Abu Bakr ibn Abi Dunya and Ibn Sa'id and Abu Awana al-Isfarayini and Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Kinani and Abu Bishr al-Dulabi and others from the major scholars of hadith and the major imams of the Muslims in their times. And it has been mentioned by some of the scholars that even from his students is Imam al-Bukhari, that from the students of Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi is his contemporary and his colleague and his peer, Imam al-Bukhari, the author of the most authentic book after the book of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, Sahih al-Bukhari, as-Sahih. And this has been mentioned by Imam, from the scholars who have mentioned this is Imam al-Lalikai. Then he has mentioned Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi from the shuyukh of al-Bukhari, from the teachers and shuyukh of Imam al-Bukhari. And Imam Abu Hatim, then he is a contemporary of Imam al-Bukhari. They lived in the same time period, they are of the same level. But Allah Ta'ala granted him a long life after Imam al-Bukhari. So he lived up for approximately 20 more years after the death of Imam al-Bukhari, as will come. Imam al-Bukhari passed away in the year 256, and Imam Abu Hatim, as will come, passed away in the year 277. So he lived for more than 20 years after the death of Imam al-Bukhari, even though he is from his contemporaries and colleagues who lived in the same time period. Then we move on to the next part of discussion, which is the statements of the major scholars, from the imams of the Muslims and the major scholars of hadith regarding the status and position of this great Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, especially in hadith and his sciences. And we will not mention the praise of the statements regarding his memorization, his precision and memory in hadith and his science, and his mastery and proficiency in this regard. This we will mention in detail in the coming part of our discussion. But here we'll just mention the general praise of the scholars and the imams of hadith on Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi. From them is a statement of Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Qattan. He says, ما رأيت مثل أبي حاتم فقيل له قد رأيت إبراهيم الحربي وإسماعيل القاضي فقال ما رأيت أجمع من أبي حاتم ولا أفضل منه. That Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Qattan, he says, I did not see anyone from the scholars who resembled Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi. So it was said to him in amazement that you are one who met and you saw the great scholars of the Muslims, from the Imams of the Muslims, Ibrahim al-Harbi and Ismail al-Qadi. So even after this he says, I have not seen anyone who had collected an ocean of knowledge in various branches of knowledge, and the one who was more virtuous than Imam Abu Hatim, the one who had collected more branches of knowledge and the one who was more virtuous than Imam Abu Hatim. Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, he comments on this statement after relaying it in this book Taqdimatul-Marifah by saying, Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, he also narrates another statement of praise on the authority of Yunus bin Abdul Ala. Yunus bin Abdul Ala, who is, as we just mentioned, from the shuyukh of Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, and someone who also narrated hadith, learned hadith and narrated hadith on this student of his, Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi. He says, Abu Zura wa Abu Hatim imama Khurasan. Abu Zura wa Abu Hatim imama Khurasan wa da'a lahuma wa qala baqa'uhuma salahun lil muslimin. Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, he says, I heard Yunus bin Abdul Ala saying that Abu Zura al-Razi and Abu Hatim al-Razi, they are the imams of the region of Khurasan. This vast region that was filled with imams of the Muslims and the foremost scholars, the major scholars of hadith, that is split today into several countries, this vast region, into Afghanistan and Iran and Uzbekistan and others. He said these two scholars, Abu Zura and Abu Hatim, they were the imams of this region, vast region of Khurasan, and he made dua for them. And he said that them remaining alive amongst the Muslims, in it is goodness and virtue for the Muslims. In it is goodness and success for the Muslims. Imam Abdul Rahman ibn Khirash, he says, كان أبو حاتم من أهل الأمانة والمعرفة. That Imam Abu Hatim, he was from those people who are to be relied upon and trusted in his narration of hadith and his rulings upon the narrators of hadith, in his rulings upon the narrators of hadith and the chains of narrations, and someone who had understanding, a firm ground of knowledge in this science, who had a firm grounding and knowledge in this science. Imam al-Nasai, the author of the well-known book of Sunan, he says, thiqatun, that he is from the utmost precise, reliable imams of hadith and the narrators of hadith. Imam al-Lalikai, he says, كان أبو حاتم إماما عالما بالحديث حافظا له متقنا متثبتا. That Imam Abu Hatim, he is from the imams of the Muslims. He was someone who memorized and preserved accurately, precisely the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and the one who had knowledge about these hadith. He had knowledge about the chains of narration, the asanis of these hadith and the mutun, the text of these hadith. He was a person of mastery and proficiency in this science, and he was mutathabbitan, someone who was extremely cautious in accepting narrations and accepting the hadith that the narrators would relay, someone who would verify and cross check and reference these matters extensively. Imam al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, he says, كان أبو حاتم أحد الأئمة الحفاظ الأثبات. That Imam Abu Hatim is from the imams who are from the Huffaz al-Athbat, the utmost precise memorizers, those scholars of hadith who preserve the sunnah and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ for the Muslims. And Imam al-Zahabi, in his book Siyar Alam al-Nubula, then he mentioned him with this praise, some of it which has preceded these titles: al-Imam al-Hafidh al-Naqid, Shaykh al-Muhaddithin, the Imam of the Muslims, the Hafidh, the one who critiqued narrators and the chains of narrations, and Shaykh al-Muhaddithin, the Imam of the Muhaddithin. Then he says, كان من بحور العلم طوف البلاد وبرع في المتن والإسناد وجمع وصنف وجرح وعدل وصحح وعلل. That he was an ocean of knowledge, and he traveled extensively all of the regions and cities and localities of the Muslims in seeking this science and the knowledge of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ until he surpassed his contemporaries. And he reached proficiency and mastery in this science in both the isnad and the matan, in both the chains of narration and the text of the ahadith. And he compiled and collected books in this science, and he disparaged and praised the narrators of hadith. He is from the imams of al-Jarh wat-Tadeel, and he is from the imams of al-Ilal, the ones who authenticated ahadith and uncovered and ruled upon their hidden defects, who exposed and uncovered their hidden defects. Then we move on to the next part of discussion, which is some aspects of the life of this great Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, and that which was a distinguishing characteristic and aspect and attribute of him. So from these matters, the foremost of these matters that he is known by, and he has continued to be known by throughout centuries, and that is a distinguishing aspect and attribute and characteristic of him, which is his memorization, his preservation, and his mastery and proficiency in hadith and his sciences. His mastery and proficiency in hadith and his sciences. Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, his son, he says, سمعت موسى بن إسحاق يقول ما رأيت أحفظ من والدك. That Musa ibn Ishaq, he told Imam Ibn Abi Hatim that I have not seen anyone from the scholars who had preserved and memorized more than your father, who had preserved and memorized more from ahadith, and that matters that pertain to the hadith from the narrators of hadith and the chains of narration other than it, than your father. And Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, when he mentioned this statement in this book Taqdimatul-Marifah, he commented on it by saying, وَكَانَ قَدْ لَقِيَ أَبَا بَكْرَ ibn Abi Shayba وَإِبْنُ نُمَيْرَ وَابْنُ مَعِينَ وَيَحْيَى الْحِمَّانِ. That Musa ibn Ishaq, he said this regarding my father, that I have seen no one who memorized more than your father. Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, he says, he is saying this even though Musa ibn Ishaq has met Ibn Abi Shayba, the author of the well-known book al-Musannaf, and Imam Ibn Numair, and Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in, and Yahya ibn Himmani, from the memorizers of the Sunnah and the Hadith of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He gave precedence amongst all of them to Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, that he did not see anyone who memorized more than him. Ahmad ibn Salama al-Nisaburi, he says, ما رأيت بعد إسحاق ومحمد بن يحيى أحفظ للحديث من أبي حاتم الرازي ولا أعلم بمعانيه. He says that I have not seen after the great Imam Ishaq and Ishaq ibn Rahuya. I have not seen anyone after Imam Ishaq ibn Rahuya and Muhammad ibn Yahya, and he's a great Imam Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Zuhli, who memorized, who was more precise and who had memorized more in the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad than Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi. And I did not see anyone after them, after Ishaq ibn Rahuya and Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Zuhli, who had more knowledge about the meanings of the text of the ahadith than Imam Abu Hatim. Uthman ibn Khurrazad, he says, أحفظ من رأيت أربعة محمد ibn Minhal al-Darir wa Ibrahim ibn Ar'ara wa Abu Zur'a wa Abu Hatim. He says that the four from the scholars who I met, who were the most precise, accurate memorizers, who had memorized the most, then they are Muhammad ibn Minhal al-Darir and Ibrahim ibn Ar'ara and Abu Zur'a al-Razi and Abu Hatim al-Razi. Abu Hatim al-Razi, that I did not meet anyone who had memorized, preserved more and more accurately than these four scholars. And Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, and now we'll mention some stories that show this great mastery and proficiency of Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi in this science, and his perfection and completion in his memory and preservation, and the vast quantity of ahadith and matters pertaining to hadith that he had memorized. So from them is that Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, his son, he says, سمعت أبي قال لي هشام ابن عمار أي شيء تحفظ من الأذواء قلت ذو الأسابع وذو الجوشن وذو الزوائد وذو اليدين وذو اللحية الكلاب وعددت له 6 فضحك وقال حفظنا نحن 3 وزدت أنت 3. That he says that my father, he told me that the great scholar Hisham ibn Ammar, that Imam Abu Hatim, he says that the great scholar Hisham ibn Ammar, he asked me a question one day, that how many narrators have you memorized that are known by Dhu al-Adwa, Dhu Fulan, that they are described by a physical attribute of theirs. They are well known by a nickname that is a physical attribute of theirs, and they are all from the Sahaba. They are all from the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, showing the great ocean of knowledge that he had in hadith and science and his memorization of the chains of narration and narrators of hadith. So he said that I have memorized six of the narrators who are known by Dhu so and so, described by their physical attribute. He says from them is Dhul Asabi', this Sahabi, Dhul Asabi', who is known as the companion of the fingers due to his distinguishing characteristics in his fingers, and Dhul Jawshan, and Dhul Zawaid, and Dhul Yadain, and Dhul Lihya al-Kilabi. And he says, I mentioned to him 6 of these narrators. So he says, Hisham ibn Ammar, he started to laugh and smile, and he says, we had only memorized 3. That he said, I wish to test you regarding your memory and regarding your knowledge in this field. So he said, we had only memorized 3, and I have now benefited from you 3 others. I have gained knowledge of 3 others that I have benefited from you. From these stories is that which Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, he says, سمعت أبي يقول قلت على باب أبي الوليد الطيالسي من أغرب علي حديثا غريبا مسندا لم أسمع به صحيحا فله علي درهم يتصدق به وكان ثم خلق أبو زرعة فمن دونه وإنما كان مرادي أن يلقى علي ما لم أسمع به فيقولون هو عند فلان فأذهب وأسمعه فلم يتهيأ لأحد أن يغرب علي حديثا. He says that my father Abu Hatim al-Razi, he says that I was on the doorstep of the great scholar of hadith Abu al-Walid al-Tayalisi. So I said, and amongst, he says, with us were the imams of hadith and this science in those times. So he says, Imam Abu Hatim, I said on the doorstep of Imam Abu Walid al-Tayalisi, who will mention to me a hadith, a rare hadith with his chains of narration, that I have not heard, with the authentic chain. Whoever could mention such a hadith to me that I have not heard with the authentic chain and I do not possess in my memory with the authentic chain, I will give to him in charity a dirham. I will give to him a charity, a dirham, a dollar or a unit of currency. And he says in that gathering were the great imams of hadith in those times, such as Abu Zur'a, his cousin Abu Zur'a, ar-Razi, and other than that. So he says, my intention was to hear a hadith that I have not heard, to hear a hadith that is not in my possession and memory, so that they would mention it with his chain, so I would know who it is narrated upon, so I could travel to that person and hear the hadith from him. So I could travel to that person, so I could hear this hadith from him, so I can narrate it directly upon him. So he says, none of these scholars from the Abu Zur'a al-Razi and others from the imams of the science, they could mention a single hadith upon me that I had not in my possession and memory, that I already did not have in my possession and memory, showing the vast ocean of narrations and a hadith that he had memorized and preserved. Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, he also says, سمعت أبي يقول قدم محمد بن يحيى النيسابوري الري فألقيت عليه 13 حديثا من حديث الزهري فلم يعرف منها إلا 3 أحاديث وصائر ذلك لم تكن عنده ولم يعرفها. That he says, I heard my father Imam Abu Hatim saying that Imam Muhammad bin Yahya al-Naysaburi, he traveled to the city of Rai, and he is a great Imam, Muhammad bin Yahya al-Dhuhli al-Naysaburi, the Imam of the Ahlul-Hadith in the city of Naysabur in his time, in the city of Naysabur, the foremost city of Khorasan in those times, a mountain of knowledge in hadith and in sciences. He says he traveled to Rai, to our city. So I narrated to him for 13 ahadith from the ahadith of Imam al-Zuhri, Imam Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri. So he did not know from these 13 ahadith except 3 ahadith. He did not have in his memory and possession except 3 ahadith, and the remaining 10 he never heard. He never heard. Why is this statement so great? Because Imam al-Dhuhli, Muhammad bin Yahya al-Dhuhli, then he is someone who is known as being the one who preserved the narrations of the Ahadith of Imam Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri. Imam al-Zuhli, he is known as someone who preserved the Ahadith and narrations of Imam Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri. The scholars have mentioned that he collected the Ahadith and the narration of Imam Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri in 2 volumes, in 2 large volumes of manuscript. And from his books that they have mentioned in his biography is al-Hadith al-Zuhri, in which he mentioned the hidden defects of the Ahadith that are narrated by the narrators upon the authority of Imam Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri. And Imam Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, he is from the 6 narrators, from the Imams of the Tabi'een, around whom the chains of narrations revolve. One will find him in the majority of the chains of narration of the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So even a scholar of the status of Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuli, who was specialized in the Hadith of Imam Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, he did not know 10 of the 13 Ahadith that Imam Abu Hatim had in his memory and possession of Imam Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, whose Ahadith are countless, that he is from those narrators who around whom the chains of narrations revolve, around whom the chains of narrations revolve. From the stories is that Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, he says, سمعت أبي يقول جرى بيني وبين أبي زرعة يوما تمييز الحديث ومعرفته فجعل يذكر أحاديث وعللها وكذلك كنت أذكر أحاديث خطأ وعللها وخطأ الشيوخ فقال لي يا أبا حاتم قل من يفهم هذا ما أعز هذا إذا رفعت هذا من 1 و2 فما أقل من تجد من يحسن هذا وربما أشك في شيء أو يتخالجني في حديث فإلى أن ألتقي معك لا أجد من يشفيني منه قال أبي وكذلك كان أمري. That he says, Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, that I heard my father one day saying, Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, that one day I was in the presence of my cousin Imam Abu Zura al-Razi, and we were revising a hadith. We were revising a hadith and matters of the science, and we were mentioning a hadith that had hidden defects and errors and mistakes. So Imam Abu Zura, started mentioning a hadith and the hidden defects to me. And I also started mentioning a hadith and the errors and mistakes of the narrators in them and the hidden defects of these ahadith and the errors of the narrators. So upon hearing this, Imam Abu Zura, he said, "O Abu Hatim, how rare are the scholars of hadith who understand this matter of ilal, of uncovering the hidden defects of ahadith, and how great is this knowledge, how rare and great is this knowledge." He says, if this knowledge is raised from 1 or 2 in the world today, then you will not find anyone who knows this branch of the science, anyone who will be a master and proficient in this branch of the hidden defects of ahadith. And Imam Abu Zura, he says, "Really, I have a doubt regarding a hadith and a detailed matter regarding a hadith, and I remain in this doubt until I meet you, O Imam Abu Hatim, until I meet you. So I do not find the answer to this doubt except with you. I do not find the one who removes this doubt and answers this difficult matter except with you." So Imam Abu Hatim, upon hearing this, he says, similar was my position with Imam Abu Zura, that he also was from those who was a master and proficient in the science of ilal, hidden defects of a hadith, and who would clear difficult matters in this science for me. That both of them, they benefited from one another, helped one another in this science, showing the great mastery and proficiency that Imam Abu Hatim reached in this science, and the vast ocean of knowledge he had of narrators and the narrations, and that this science, the science of ilal, the hidden defects of a hadith, which is the most difficult part of this science, the most difficult aspect of this science, that only imams that can be counted on the fingertips that reach proficiency in from them is this great Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi. And we will take a small break here and continue after the break. If there are any questions, then we can address them. And if there are no questions, then we will stop here and continue after the break. So we return back to our lecture in which we were presenting the biography of this great Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, and we were discussing some of the distinguishing aspects of his life those distinguishing characteristics of his life that which he is well known by, and in some of it are that with which we can benefit and learn. So after finishing the first matter, which is his proficiency and mastery in hadith and his sciences, and his accurateness and his precision in memorizing the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and matters pertaining to the hadith from the narrators of hadith and the chains of narrations, and the vast ocean quantity of these matters that he had memorized, we move on to the second matter from his life, which is his striving and sacrificing in seeking knowledge. His sacrifices and striving himself in seeking knowledge, and some of it has preceded when we talked about his journeys and some of the stories that we mentioned of these vast journeys that lasted years and years, in which he traveled by foot thousands of kilometers, bearing the most difficult of circumstances and poverty and of hunger and all difficult matters in seeking knowledge. And really for us he is an example in this matter. So from that which we can add to his sacrificing in seeking knowledge, and that which we can benefit from, is that Ahmad ibn Ali al-Raqam, he says, سمعت الحسن بن الحسين الدارستيني قال سمعت أبا حاتم يقول قال لي أبو زرعة ما رأيت أحرص على طلب الحديث منك فقلت له إن عبد الرحمن ابني لحريص فقال ما أشبه أباه فما ظلم. That he says that I heard Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi saying that Imam Abu Zura al-Razi said to me that verily I have not seen anyone who was more keen and diligent in seeking hadith and his sciences, his knowledge of hadith than you. That I have not seen someone who was more devoted and he sacrificed more and he was more dedicated and more keen in seeking the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ than you. So Imam Abu Hatim, he devoted this praise of himself by saying that verily my son Abdul Rahman, the great Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, Abu Muhammad Abdul Rahman Ibn Abi Hatim, the author of this great book, then he is someone who's keen, he is someone who's dedicated, and he is someone who is devoted. So Abu Zura, upon hearing this, he said, Man ashbaha abahu fama zalam, that the one who is followed his father in his footsteps and who has resembled in his father in this matter, then he has not oppressed, then he has not then he is not at fault, then he is not oppressed. Then al-Raqam, he says, Sa'altu Abdul Rahman an ittifaq kathrat as-sama' lahu wa su'alatihi li abihi فقال ربما كان يأكل وأقرأ عليه ويمشي وأقرأ عليه ويدخل الخلاء وأقرأ عليه ويدخل البيت في طلب شيء وأقرأ عليه. So al-Raqam, he says, upon hearing this, he says that I asked Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, the son of Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, Abdul Rahman, that how did he hear this ocean of knowledge from his father, and how did he compile it and collect it from his father, his rulings upon the narratives of hadith, his ruling upon the chains of narrations, his ruling upon the hidden defects of hadith and other matters. How did he ask his father these questions, and how did he compile and collect them? So Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, he says, showing the dedication and showing the sacrifices that these scholars made for seeking knowledge, and that their whole time was devoted to knowledge, that there was not a time in their life, in their daily lives from the mornings until the evenings, until it was devoted to knowledge. It was allocated to seeking knowledge. So he says that my father, he used to be eating and I used to read upon him. I used to ask him, I used to read upon him, and he would answer me, and he would convey knowledge to me. And he would be walking and I would read upon him, and I would ask him and he would convey knowledge to me. And he would, even to the point, he would enter the place where he would relieve himself, then I would continue to read upon him from the outside. I would continue to read upon him from the outside. And he would enter his house and the utmost areas of his house, and I would continue to read upon him and ask him. and benefit from him, and he will convey knowledge to me, showing the great sacrifice and efforts and dedication of these great imams for the knowledge and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that there was no instance in their lives when they're eating, when they're walking, when they're in their house, when they're outside, to the point even when they are in the washrooms relieving themselves, that this activity of learning and teaching in whatever way and capacity, it continued. And from these matters that show the great sacrifice of these great imams for knowledge and the science of hadith, and they're not just dedicating all of their time and their effort for knowledge, rather they, even the small portion of wealth that they possessed, even out of their dire poverty, the small portion of wealth that they possessed, even this was allocated for knowledge and seeking the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So regarding this, Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, his son, the son of Imam Abu Hatim, he says, كنت مع أبي في الشام في الرحلة فدخلنا مدينة فرأيت رجلا واقفا على الطريق يلعب بحية ويقول من يهب لي درهما حتى أبلع هذه الحية، فالتفت إلي أبي فقال يا ابني احفظ دراهمك فمن أجلها تبلع الحيات فمن أجلها تبلع الحيات. He says that one day I was with my father, Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, in the region of Sham, the present day country of Syria and Palestine and Jordan and Lebanon, etc., in a journey for seeking the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he said one day we entered a city from Sham. So he saw a person who was standing on the street, and he was playing with a snake. And he was saying that who would give me a dirham, a dollar, a unit of currency, so that I could eat this snake. So he says, my father, Imam Abu Hatim, he turned to me and he said, oh my son, preserve your money, preserve your dirhams, because this is the reason, by wasting one's wealth in such futile matters, one reaches a state where he would have to eat snakes, where you have to reach this position of standing on the street in front of the people asking for a dirham to eat a snake, That all of their money, then it was allocated and they sacrificed it, the little wealth that they possessed, for seeking the knowledge of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then we move on to the next point of discussion, which is the creed of this great Imam and the methodology of the creed of Imam Abu Hatim in matters of belief. And he is upon the unified methodology of the creed of the Salaf, Ahle-Hadith, Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah in these matters, along with the other Imams of the Salaf that have preceded. And we have mentioned in our previous lecture in the biography of Imam Abu Zur'a al-Razi that Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi, he authored his well-known treatise Asl Sunnah wa I'tiqaduddin. Asl Sunnah wa I'tiqaduddin, a brief, concise treatise that contains the fundamental points of the creed of the Salaf, Ahl-Hadith, Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that has been relayed and narrated with this chain of narration by Imam al-Lalikai. Imam al-Lalikai in his great book Sharh Usul I'tiqad Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And in this book, Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, he asked his father, Imam Abu Hatim, and his uncle, Imam Abu Zur'a, regarding matters of creed, the matters of creed of the Salaf, and they answered with this great statements and treatise that contains the fundamental aspects of the creed of the Salaf Ahl-Hadith, in which they are unanimously agreed with the remaining Imams of the Salaf in these matters. He says, سألت أبي وأبا زرعة عن مذاهب أهل السنة في أصول الدين وما أدرك عليه العلماء في جميع الأمصار وما يعتقدان من ذلك، فقال أدركنا العلماء في جميع الأنصار حجازا وعراقا وشاما ويمنا، فكان من مذهبهم الإيمان قول وعمل يزيد وينقص، والقرآن كلام الله غير مخلوق بجميع جهاته، والقدر خيره وشره من الله عز وجل, until the end of this great treatise, which is well known as Aqidat al-Raziyin, Aqidat of the two Razi Imams, Imam Abu Hatim and Abu Zur'a. Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, he says at the beginning of this treatise that I asked my father, Imam Abu Hatim, and my uncle Abu Zura regarding the madhab of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the Ahlul Hadith, the Salaf, in matters of creed, in the fundamental aspects of the religion, and that which they found all of their shuyukh and teachers from the major imams of the Muslims, from the major imams of the Ahlul Hadith, the Salaf, in all localities and regions that they traveled to, that Imam Abu Hatim traveled to, from the east to the west. He did not leave a city, locality, except that he entered. So he said, I asked him regarding the creed of the imams in all these vast regions, and what they themselves, Imam Abu Hatim and Abu Zura, believe in these matters of creed. So they said, both of them, Abu Hatim and Abu Zura, that we found all of the scholars in all of the regions that we traveled to, from Hijaz, Makkah and Medina, and Iraq, this vast region, and Sham, this vast region of Sham and Yemen, all of them, then they were upon one madhab, they were upon one methodology and aspects of creed. And from these matters they mention al-iman qawlun wa amal, yazidu wa yanqus, that iman, belief, it is both statements and actions, and that it increases and it decreases, and that the Quran, it is the speech of Allah, it is not created, and that the qadar, the divine pre-decree, both is good and is evil, is from Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, until the end of this great treatise that contains the fundamental aspects of the creed of the Salaf Ahlul Hadith, in which is clear proof of the creed of this great Imam Abu Hatim in being with the unanimous creed of the remaining Imams of the Salaf Ahlul Hadith. At the end of this treatise, Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, he says, سمعت أبي يقول علامة أهل البدع الوقيعة في أهل الأثر وعلامة الزنادقة تسميتهم أهل السنة الحشوية يريدون إبطال الآثار وعلامة الجهمية تسميتهم أهل السنة مشبهة وعلامة القدرية تسميتهم أهل الأثر مجبرة وعلامة المرجية تسميتهم أهل السنة مخالفة ونقصانية وعلامة الرافضة تسميتهم أهل السنة ناصبة ولا يلحق أهل السنة إلا اسم واحد ويستحيل أن تجمعهم هذه الأسماء. That he says, that I heard my father saying at the end of this treatise, that the sign of the people of innovation and misguidance is to ridicule the Ahlul Athar, the Ahlul Hadith. Their sign of the people of innovation and misguidance is to mock and ridicule the Ahlul Hadith. And all of the people of innovation and misguidance, they accuse the Ahlul Hadith of the opposite of the innovation that they're upon. That they're upon one extreme of innovation misguidance, they accuse the Ahlul Hadith who are on the middle path of the opposite, the other extreme that they are upon. So he says the Zanadiqa, the heretics, they accuse Ahlul Sunnah, Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Asar of being Hashawiyya, meaning those who are the lowest of people, those who are the lowest of people, and those people who follow texts and narrations. And the heretics, they are in the other extreme of rejecting totally ahadith and texts and narrations. And he says the sign of the Jahmiyyah is to name the Ahlul Hadith, the Ahlul Sunnah, to be mushabbiha, those who negate the attributes of Allah. The Jahmiyyah, they accuse Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Sunnah of the opposite, which is to be those people who resemble the attributes to the attributes of Allah to the attributes of the creation, li'adhu billah, the mushabbiha. And the sign of the Qadariyah, those who negate belief in al-Qadar, the divine pre-decree, is that they name the Ahlul Athar, Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Sunnah mujabbira, those people who say that a believer, a person is forced upon his actions, the actions of sin, etc. that he does, then he is forced upon these actions. That is the other extreme. And he says the sign of the Murjia, those people who negate that actions are part of Iman, is that they name and title Ahlul Sunnah, Ahlul Athar, Ahlul Hadith to be those people who are the Nuqsaniyya, those people who expel people from the fold of Islam due to their actions being decreased, or them committing sins, as which is the extreme other opposite. And the sign of the Rafid, the Shia, is that they title the Ahlul Sunnah, Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Asar to be Nasibah, the Rafid, the Shia who went to extremes in Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anhu and the Ahlul Bayt, that they accuse Ahlul Hadith who are in the middle to be at the other extreme, which is the Nasibah, those people who have enmity to Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anhu and the Ahlul Bayt. And Imam Abu Hatim, he finishes his great statement by saying that Ahlul Sunnah, Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Athar, they do not have except one name, except one description and name, and it is impossible that all of these matters could be attributed and ascribed to them. That all of these matters that are falsely ascribed to them, then they are rejected. It is impossible that they could be ascribed to them. From the statement, explicit statements of this great Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, expounding his great, clear, sound creed and his position regarding the people of innovation and misguidance, is that Abdurrahman ibn Hamdan ibn Marzuban, he says, قال لي أبو حاتم الرازي إذا رأيت البغدادي يحب أحمد بن حنبل فاعلم أنه صاحب سنة وإذا رأيته يبغض يحيى بن معين فاعلم أنه كذاب. That he says, Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, he told me that if you see a Baghdadi, a person from the residents of Baghdad, if he loves Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the Imam of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah who resided in Baghdad, if you see him loving him, then know that he is a person of the Sunnah. Then know he is from the Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Sunnah. And if you see a person of Baghdad despising and hating Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in, then know that he is a kadhab, he is a liar in his narration of hadith. Because Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in is the Imam of al-Jarh wat-Tadeel, those who exposed the faults and the errors and the mistakes and the lying of the narrators of hadith. So if you see someone who despising him, then know he is a liar and fabricator in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As far as position regarding the Jahmiyyah, then from them is his statement, Man qala inna lafzi bil Quran makhluq fahuwa Jahmi. That the one who says that my recitation of the Quran is created, my word with the Quran is created, then he is a Jahmi. He is a Jahmi. From his statements regarding the Murji'ah, he says, هذا مذهبنا واختيارنا وما نعتقده وندين الله به ونسأل الله السلام في الدين والدنيا أن الإيمان قول وعمل وتصديق بالقلب وإقرار باللسان وعمل بالأركان مثل الصلاة والزكاة لمن كان له مال والحج لمن استطاع إليه سبيلا والصوم شهر رمضان وجميع فرائض الله التي فرض على عباده العمل بها من الإيمان والإيمان يزيد وينقص. That Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi says, our madhab and our position in matters of creed, and that which we believe in, and that which we worship Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala regarding, and we ask Allah Ta'ala for safety in matters of the religion and the worldly life, is that Iman, faith, it is both speech and actions. It is belief in the heart, it is statement of the tongue, and it is actions by the bodily limbs. And he says, from Iman is Salah, the prayer, and Zakat, giving the obligatory charity for the one who possesses that amount of wealth upon which Zakat is obligatory, and performing the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, for the one who fulfills his conditions, and fasting the month of Ramadan, and all of the obligatory acts that Allah Ta'ala has obligated upon his servants, then acting upon it, all of this is from Iman. All of these actions, that actions are part of Iman, and Iman, faith, increases and decreases. Iman, faith, increases and decreases. And Imam Abu Hatim, then he's from the foremost of the Imams of the Salaf, Ahlul-Hadith, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, in matters of creed, that the scholars refer back to regarding his statements in matters of creed, and take his statements as proofs in these matters. Rather, he became a test for the people of innovation and misguidance after him. That a person who loves him, Imam Abu Hatim, he is considered to be from Ahlul Sunnah, the Ahlul Hadith, the Salaf. And the one who hates him, despises him, he is considered to be from the people of innovation and misguidance. Abu Hassan, Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, ibn Shu'aib, At-Tabari, he says, إِذَا رَأَيْتَ رَازِيًّا خُرَسَانِيًّا يُحِبُّ أَبَا حَاتِمْ وَأَبَا زُرْعَةٍ فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ صَاحِبْ سُنَّةٍ. That if you see a person from the region of Rai, from the locality, city of Rai, from the region of Khurasan, that he loves Abu Hatim al-Razi, praises him and loves them, Abu Hatim al-Razi and Abu Zur'a al-Razi, know that he is a person of the Sunnah. Know that he is a person upon the Sunnah, upon the methodology of the Ahlul Hadith, the Salaf, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah in matters of creed. Then we move on to the next part of discussion, which is the methodology of this great Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi in matters of jurisprudence, in subsidiary matters. And again we'll find that he is with the unanimous creed of the Imams of the Ahlul Hadith, upon the madhab and manhaj of the Ahlul Hadith, in giving utmost precedence to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, going with the Hadith wherever it leads him, and not having fanatism and extremism to a madhab from the madhab, shunning fanatism, extremism, madhahib and taqleed, blind following of an imam from the imams. Imam al-Khalili, he says, كان أبو حاتم عالما باختلاف الصحابة وفقه التابعين ومن بعدهم. That Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, then he had vast knowledge. Then he has vast knowledge of the positions of the Sahaba in matters of jurisprudence, in subsidiary matters, and he had knowledge of the fiqh, the jurisprudence of the tabi'een and those who came after them. That this was his sources for matters of jurisprudence, subsidiary matters, the fiqh of the Sahaba and the tabi'een and those after them, the fiqh of the Salaf, the fiqh, the jurisprudence of the Salaf, these imams of the Ahle-Hadith before the madhahib and taqleed, blind following, etc. even came into existence. And we have mentioned in our previous biography of Imam Abu Zur'a al-Razi this statement of Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, in which he says, سمعت أبي وأبا زرع يأمران بحجران أهل الزيغ والبدع يغلظان في ذلك أشد التغليظ وينكران وضع الكتب برأي في غير آثار وينهيان عن مجالسة أهل الكلام والنظر في كتب المتكلمين ويقولان لا يفلح صاحب كلام أبدا. That he says, I heard my father Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi and Abu Zur'a al-Razi ordering with boycotting the people of innovation and misguidance and refuting them refuting them with the most severe of refutations, and they forbade authoring books, collecting books that are based upon rai, upon personal opinions and judgments and rulings that are devoid of athar, that are devoid of the ahadith, of the Prophet ﷺ, and they forbade from sitting with the Ahlul Kalam, the people of rhetoric, and to look into the books of the Mutakallimin, the people of rhetoric, and they would say that the person of Kalam, the person of rhetoric and the person of rai, of opinion, judgment, personal opinions and judgments, he will never be successful. He will never be successful in the religion of Islam. Imam al-Lalakai, in his book Sharh Usul I'tiqad, he says, وجدت في بعض كتب أبي حاتم محمد بن إدريس بن المنذر الحنظلي الرازي رحمه الله مما سمع منه يقول مذهبنا واختيارنا اتباع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وأصحابه والتابعين ومن بعدهم بإحسان وترك النظر في موضع بدعهم والتمسك بمذهب أهل الأثر مثل أبي عبد الله أحمد بن حنبل وإسحاق بن إبراهيم وأبي عبيد القاسم بن سلام والشافعي ولزوم الكتاب والسنة والذب عن الأئمة المتبعة لآثار السلف واختيار ما اختاره أهل السنة من الأئمة في الأمصار مثل مالك بن أنس في المدينة والأوزاعي بالشام وليث بن سعد بمصر وسفيان الثوري وحماد بن زيد بالعراق. He says that I found in some of the books of Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi that which the narrators have relayed from him, that he said our madhab and position and methodology in the matters of jurisprudence is that we follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ittiba Rasulillah, following the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba and the Tabi'een and those who followed them upon their understanding, the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, those who came after them, and to hold fast to the madhab of the Ahlul Athar, hold fast to the madhab of the Ahlul Hadith, the methodology of the Ahlul Hadith, such as Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Imam Ishaq ibn Rahuya and Imam Abu Ubaid al-Qasim ibn Salam and Imam al-Shafi'i and other than them, and to hold steadfast to the Quran and the Sunnah, to derive rulings and holding steadfast to the Quran and the Sunnah, and to defend the Imams who unrestrictedly and conditionally follow the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Athar of the Salaf upon the understanding of the Salaf, and to base upon our positions upon that which these Imams have mentioned in all of the localities, and base our methodology upon their methodology, such as Imam Malik ibn Anas in the city of Medina, and Imam al-Awza'i in the region of Sham, in Imam Layth ibn Sa'd in the region of Misr, Egypt, and Sufyan al-Thawri and Hammad ibn Zayd both in the region of Iraq. And he concludes this great statement by saying, وَالِاتِّبَاعِ لِلْأَثَرِ عَنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم وعن الصحابة والتابعين بعدهم بإحسان وترك كلام المتكلمين وترك مجالستهم وهجرانهم وترك مجالسة من وضع الكتب بالرأي بلا آثار. And he says our methodology is to make ittiba', follow unconditionally and strictly the hadith, the athar of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba and the Tabi'in and those who came after them upon their understanding, and to leave the speech of the mutakallimin, the people of kalam, rhetoric and opinions and rai and judgments, and to leave off shunning sitting with them, and to boycott them, and to leave off sitting with those people who author books upon rai, upon personal opinions and judgments and fatawa that are devoid of athar, that are devoid of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All of these statements show the clear methodology of this great Imam Abu Hatim al-Razi, that he was upon the unanimous methodology of the Ahle-Hadith, the Imams of the Salaf Ahle-Hadith, in unconditionally and unrestrictedly following the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and shunning rai, shunning personal opinions and judgments and fatawa, and giving precedence to it over the hadith and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we'll mention just one example of the methodology of this Imam with going with the hadith wherever it leads him. If a hadith is established to be authentic near him, then he follows it unconditionally, unrestrictedly, without care and concern for whoever opposes him, from the Imams. So this story is that Qasim ibn Abi Salih, he says, سمعت أبا حاتم يقول قال لي أبو زرعة ترفع يديك في القنوت قلت لا فترفع أنت قال نعم قلت فما حجتك قال حديث ابن مسعود. That he says that I heard Abu Hatim al-Razi saying that one day Imam Abu Zur'a, my cousin Imam Abu Zur'a, he asked me that do you, O Abu Hatim, do you raise your hands while making the dua of qunut? While making the dua of qunut, which is in the witr prayer. So Imam Abu Hatim, he said no. So he asked Abu Zur'a, do you raise your hands? So he said yes. He said yes. So he asked him, what is your proof? What is your proof? So he said, the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the hadith that is narrated by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, in which it is mentioned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam raised his hands while making the qunut. Regardless of this specific matter and his ruling, what concerns us is the methodology of this Imam in matters of jurisprudence here, in this matter of jurisprudence of raising the hands in the qunut, that their methodology was to follow the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They had no proof other than the Quran and the Sunnah, that they derived all the proofs from the Sunnah. And if a hadith is deemed to be established near them, they would follow it. They would follow it. So the proof that was mentioned is not a statement of an Imam, not a position of a madhab from the madhahib, rather, and not a speech from the speech of men, from rai, personal opinions, judgments, rather the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. So Imam Abu Hatim, he says, قُلْتُ رَوَاهُ لَيْث ibn Abi Sulaim. That when he heard that Abu Zur'a, he says, my proof is the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud raising the hands in the qunut of witr. Imam Abu Hatim, he says, in his chain of narration is Layth bin Abi Sulaim, which is a well-known weak narrator of hadith. So this hadith, he ruled upon it to be weak, and this is why he rejected it. Then he says, Abu Zur'a, fa hadith Abu Huraira. So then he says, I also have the hadith of Abu Huraira, in which the Prophet ﷺ, it is mentioned that he raised his hands in qunut. So he says, Qultu rawahu ibn Lahiyya, that in his chain of narrations, Abdullah ibn Lahiyya, he was also a well-known weak narrator of hadith. So he rejected this hadith also due to the weakness in the chain. Qala hadith ibn Abbas, he says, Abu Zur'a, I also have the hadith of Abdullah ibn Abbas. So he says, rawahu Auf, that in it also is a narrator, Auf, by which this hadith is also ruled upon to be weak. So after these three hadith that Abu Zur'a presented, in which is proof of the Prophet ﷺ raising his hands in the qunut, and Imam Abu Hatim ruled upon all of them to be weak, then he says, فَمَا حُجَّتُكْ فِي تَرْكِهِ, that what is your proof, O Abu Hatim, in leaving off the hands during the dua of qunut, in not raising the hands in the dua of qunut. And we will see again in his answer that he did not mention this is my personal opinion, my personal judgment, or I have based it on a statement of this Imam or that Imam, or I have followed this madhab or that madhab. He says, hadith, qultu hadith Anas ibn Malik. My proof of not raising the hands in the qunut, then it is the hadith of Anas ibn Malik, anna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam kana la yarfa yadayhi fi shay min ad-du'a illa fil istifta fa illa fil istisqa fa sakata. That he says, my proof is the hadith of Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu, that he said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he did not used to raise his hands in the dua except in the dua of istisqa, the dua of asking for rain, the dua of asking for rain. And other than it, the Prophet ﷺ, he says that he did not used to raise his hands in the dua. So upon hearing this, Abu Zura remained quiet. Upon hearing this, Abu Zura remained quiet as he had no answer for this authentic hadith. As he had no answer for this authentic hadith. So as we said, that which is pertaining to this matter is not what concerns us. What concerns us is the methodology that we see of this great Imam, that they followed the hadith unrestrictedly, unconditionally, and their reference and source was the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in all matters of the religion. They would discuss proofs by mentioning a hadith, and they would weaken a hadith and not act upon them, and if a hadith is established, they would act upon it. They would act upon it unconditionally and unrestrictedly. Regarding this matter, we can mention some additional benefit, that this hadith of Anas ibn Malik, then it is a authentic hadith, agreed upon hadith, related by Imam Bukhari and Muslim in the Sahihain, related by Imam Bukhari and Muslim in their books as-Sahihain. And the apparent words of this hadith, they negate raising of the hands in any dua except for istisqa, except for the dua for rain. And this hadith, then its apparent state, it is mu'arid, it is in contrast and this opposition to the other ahadith that have come in the Sahihain themselves, in which there is mention of the Prophet ﷺ raising hands with the dua in other matters other than this istisqa, in other places and times other than asking for rain. Other than asking for rain, Imam al-Bukhari himself, in his book as-Sahih, in his book Kitab al-Da'awat, the book of prayers and the book of du'as, he has mentioned a chapter, Bab Raful Aidi fi Dua, the chapter of raising the hands with the dua, and he has mentioned several of these ahadith, several ahadith in which the Prophet ﷺ raised his hands with dua in several places, in several times other than istisqa, other than istisqa. Imam Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in his great book Fathul Bari, he reconciled between these ahadith in which there is an apparent contradiction. These two set of authentic ahadith, both are in the Sahihain, in which there is apparent contradiction. He says, Huwa Sahih, the hadith of Anas ibn Malik, in which the Prophet ﷺ did not raise his hands in dua except in the istisqa. He says, Huwa Sahih, lakin jama'a baynahu لكن جمع بينه وبين أحاديث الباب وما في معناها بأن المنفي صفة خاصة لا أصل الرفع وحاصله أن الرفع في الاستسقاء يخالف غيره إما بالمبالغة إلى أن تصير اليدان في حذو الوجه مثلا وفي الدعاء إلى حذو المنكبين. That he says, this authentic hadith of Anas ibn Malik, in which it is mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ did not used to raise his hands in the dua except in the istisqa, except in the rain prayer and the dua for rain. It is authentic. It is authentic, but it can be reconciled with the other authentic ahadith in which there is mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ used to raise his hands with the dua in other places, other times, by mentioning that which has been negated in the hadith of Anas, it is a specific way and manner of raising the hands, and not raising the hands in totality. That Anas ibn Malik in this narration, he negated a specific way and manner of raising the hands, that the Prophet ﷺ did not used to raise these hands in such a manner except in istisqa, except in the dua of the rain, and in other times and places he would not raise his hands in such a manner when making dua. So he did not negate the matter of raising the dua hands with the dua in totality, rather he negated a specific manner of raising the dua. Hafiz ibn Hajar, he says, for example, from these matters is that in the rain prayer and in the dua for rain, the hands are raised to the face, for example, are raised until the face, until they're facing the face. And in the other du'as, in other times, other places, they are raised until one's shoulders. They are raised until one's shoulders. So this is a way of reconciling these two authentic ahadith, that which is negated in the hadith of Anas is this specific manner of raising the dua in istisqa, which is to raise it in extreme length, the hands to the face or above. And in the other ahadith, then the Prophet ﷺ raised his hands with the dua until a general raising, which is to the point of the shoulders or around it. So regardless of this matter, as we said, what concerns us is the methodology of this great Imam of basing his religion upon the ahadith and the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and going with the hadith and the sunnah if it is established to be authentic wherever it leads him. Then we will conclude with the final point of discussion, which is the death of this great Imam, Imam Abu Hatim ar-Razi, rahimahullah. And we will mention this great story that shows their zeal and dedication for knowledge and for the hadith and the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, even until their last breaths. As we mentioned in the previous biography of Imam Abu Zura, his cousin, Imam Abu Zura al-Razi, that even on his deathbed, then the hadith of the dying person reciting La ilaha illallah, then Imam Abu Hatim and Imam Ibn Wara, they were present amongst Imam Abu Zura's company, and they were narrating parts of the chain, and then Imam Abu Zura continued the remaining part of the chain and the hadith, remaining words of this hadith, after which he passed away. So similar is Imam Abu Hatim until his dying breaths. Then he was busied and dedicated and devoted to hadith and his sciences. Hadith and his sciences. Imam Ibn Abi Hatim, his son, he mentions in this great book Taqdimatul-Marifah, he says, حضرت أبي وكان في النزع وأنا لا أعلم فسألته عن عقبة ابن عبد الغافر يروي عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم له صعبة فقال براسه لا فلم أقنع منه فقلت فهمت عني له صحبة قال هو تابعي. That he says that one day I entered upon my father Imam Abu Hatim ar-Razi, and he was in his last breaths. He was on his last breaths, but I did not realize that he was lying down, and I entered upon him and he was on his last dying breaths, but I did not realize. So I asked him, as always, matter from the matters of this science and from the narrators of hadith. He says that Uqba ibn Abdul Ghafir, he's a narrator who has narrated a hadith on the authority of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So is he from the Sahaba? Is his narration connected? Is he from the Sahaba, so that his chain of narration is connected? So my father, he said with his head no. He shaked his head to say no. He said, so I did not realize that he was in his dying last breaths, and I was surprised at him giving an answer in such a manner, and I was not sufficed with his answer. So I told him, Fahimta anni, do you understand? Do you understand what I'm saying? Did you hear what I'm saying? Lahu sohba, does he have companionship with the Prophet ﷺ or not? Does he have companionship or not? So Imam Abu Hatim now, even in this dying last dead breaths, he was compelled to speak and say, Huwa tabi'i, that he is a tabi'i. He is a tabi'i and not a sahabi. Not a sahabi, that even until his dying last breaths, then he was busied with knowledge and devoted to it, and passed away upon this knowledge of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and that which pertains to it. And this great Imam Abu Hatim ar-Razi, then he passed away in the city of Rai, which is present day Tehran, the capital of Iran, in the month of Sha'ban, in the year 277 after the Hijrah. 277 after the Hijrah, and he lived for a period of 83 years. He lived for a period of approximately 83 years. فَرَحِمَهُ رحمة واسعة واسكنه فسي جناتي وجزاه عنا وعن المسلمين خير الجزاء. And with this we have concluded this lecture series of mentioning the biographies of the 18 eminent scholars of hadith from this great book Taqdimatul-Marifah bi Kitab al-Jarh wat-Tadeel of Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi. I ask Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala that He accepts from us that we presented, and that He makes it a proof for us, not a proof against us on the Day of Judgment, and that He overlooks our shortcomings and errors and mistakes, and that He grants us sincerity, ikhlas in our statements and our actions. Innahu Samiyun Mujib. If there are any questions, then we can conclude with them.
After studying these 8 Imams, what other books or what are the follow books that we students should study or refer?
The books of the biographies of the scholars of Hadith, then there are several in number and they cannot be enumerated. The Imams of the science and biographies of the pillars of the science that contain several benefits that one can benefit from regardless of his level. If he was a scholar or a student of knowledge, even a layman Muslim, then we have tried to mention benefits that every group of people can benefit from, the old, from the young, from the males, from the females, from all levels. So the books that have compiled and collected these biographies, then there are several in number, they cannot be enumerated. But the Imams of al-Jarh wat-Tadeel, then the introduction to their great books that they have authored, they contain several of these biographies from the pillars of this science. So from them is this great Imam Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi in this book Taqdimatul-Marifah, that he made as an introduction of his great book al-Jarh wat-Tadeel. From them is Imam al-Uqayli in his book al-Du'afa, and Imam Ibn Adi in his book al-Kamil fi Du'afa al-Rijal. In the introduction of this book, they have mentioned biographies of these and other Imams from the foremost pillars of this science, and mentioning narrations and statements regarding their knowledge, their virtue, their piety, their creed, their methodology, jurisprudence, and other matters that have made them sources and reference points for the Muslims in these matters, that their statements are to be accepted and to be returned to in ruling upon narrators of hadith and ruling upon the chains of narrations of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So one can read the biographies of Du'afa of Imam al-Uqayli, al-Kamil of Imam Ibn Adi, and other books. And from the latter books, there is an ocean in the science which author has collected. Most of that which has preceded him is the great book Siyar A'lam al-Nubula. Siyar A'lam al-Nubula of Imam al-Zahabi, rahimahullah. In this great book, he has collected that which is found in the books that have preceded him, and he is from the well-known Huffaz, from the well-known Imams, the trustworthy, reliable scholars of Muslims. So one can refer back to this book and find many of these matters that he has compiled in the biographies that he has mentioned in his book, As-Siyar. No.
The habit of, following these ulama, following his father as he was eating and reading to him here and there, was this, or does this happen from the fear of the lack of time and too much to do, or is it for revision, or what is it meant? What is it for?
This is the reason Allah Ta'ala created these scholars for. Allah Ta'ala created them, brought them upon this earth for the sunnah and the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are the means by which Allah Ta'ala has preserved the sunnah. They dedicated their entire lives, every breath, their mornings, their evenings, their walking, their lying, their eating, their drinking, even relieving themselves for this matter, for this science. And this is all they were concerned with. This is all they were concerned with. So this shows their dedication and their devotion and their sacrifice and their zeal for this science and the matters of this science, And such stories have preceded with us in several biographies, and the other biographies that one can refer back to, he will find several stories of the scholars and their vast sacrifices and devotion, dedication to this science, and being busied with it day and night over all matters of their other worldly matters, or over all of the other worldly matters. No. And if there are no questions, then we'll end the series here. Alhamdulillahi alladhi bi ni'matihi tatimmu salihat. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira.
وذكر فإن الذكرى تنفع المؤمنين وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون